Hello. How are you? You and you and you and you and you. How are you? Okay. I hope you're doing fantastic. I hope you're doing great. I know I'm gonna go down in history as the person who said, I hope you're doing fantastic, like on every single one of her videos. Yes, that's gonna be me, and I'm okay with that. I hope you're doing fantastic. All right, you guys, so in today's video, obviously I will be talking to you about all the books that I read in the month of April. Did I achieve my goal of reading 8 books, and did I finish all those 8 books that I set myself to read in April? We shall find out. So until then, stay put and don't go anywhere.
Subscribe, hit that button, let's grow together. Share with your friends through any kind of weather. Library without borders, we're reaching for the sky. Join the journey now, come on, don't be shy. Reading here, no limit to where you can go.
All right, you guys, first check my shirt. Okay, what does it say? I don't know, but I'll take a picture so you guys can read. But it's for Congo, obviously. You guys know that every time I talk about a certain topic or a certain country, I like to tell you that I am a person who likes to mind her business, okay? And for many of you, I'm thinking, since we do not live under the rock, you may now know that the United States and Congo have entered into a deal, you know? And that deal involves the extraction of our natural resources in exchange for, I don't know, some kind of peace in Congo. Go figure. Now, my opinion, which I do not shy away from giving it, is I do not agree. I don't like the fact that Congo went into business with the United States, especially under Trump's administration. Now, I have plenty of reasons and arguments that I can give you, but this is not the place for it. But I just wanted to let you know that that's what's going on. And as that is going on, you guys already know about the coltan, the gold, the tin, you know, all of that. Those natural resources that are feeding the world today comes from here. I'm from there. Anyways, so like I said, sometimes I will see people talk about, oh, you know, why are you minding, you know, the United States? It's because, one, I'm Congolese, and, you know, we have entered into a deal. And 2, I live in Canada, right? I'm Canadian as well. So United States and Canada, we have all the tariffs war going on, and there seems to be a lot of, you know, opinions about Americans and Canadians. So obviously the United States is kind of my business because we're Congo, Canada, United States, and I'm all of it. I'm all of it. So anyways, y'all know I like to ramble on, okay? Let's talk about the books that I read for the month of April. Now, I filmed a video in which I talked about 4 of those books, okay? I'll show you 4 of these books. So I will not go into details because I went into details in that video that hubby is still working on. So he's done okay, right? So far, since we've set our goals to film this amount of videos, have shorts, you know, we're doing the best. So far, we can't complain, but it's still not at the speed that I would like for these videos to be put out. But, you know, he's only one person. He's like my editor, my producer, my everything. Literally, he's my everything. So anyways, you guys, so real quick, rapid fire, let's go through these books and then I'll talk about the other books. So unfortunately, I did not read the rest of the purple books, which I believe were this. Okay, and you guys, funny thing is, when I was doing my purple TBR, Do you know what would have really sealed that theme? It was this book. Right? The color purple. That would have sealed. I didn't see it. It wasn't anywhere. And I knew I had the book, but I thought about it only after I had filmed the video and the video was already out. I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, so I talked about No Crystal Stair by Mary Ruth Sarsfield, and it's by Canadian author. She's from Montreal. And although this says it's a fiction story of urban struggle in the 1940s, I have to look into it. I feel like it's fiction, but it might not be fiction. But it's literally the story of Montreal. You guys know about Montreal, okay? Montreal is like, I don't know, I think Toronto is like the equivalent of New York, but like Montreal is like second to that. Like it's very vibrant. It's French, obviously, but there's also, you know, English speakers, and you know, it's very diverse. But this book talks about Montreal in the 1940s, which is at the dawn of Second World War II. And it talks about a lot of the Black people who came from the United States and relocated in Canada, and their struggles, their everyday struggle dealing with racism in Montreal. I know it's very not talked about, you know, the racism that exists in Canada, because it's not at the scale of, say, a country like the United States or, you know, Britain or South Africa, you know, all those places. So when you take that in consideration, we don't really hear a lot about the racism going on in Canada. But yeah, it was very prominent in Montreal during the 1940s. And you follow different people, especially the author. Well, I don't know if it's her life, but the main character, her name is Marion. In French, you say Marion. But we follow her and her two children. And I think the mother is very white passing, because this story is also about passing. She's very white passing, and she works in a hotel, like as a maid. That's all the jobs that, you know, Black people could get. Even passing ones, especially the ones who stayed true to their Blackness, right? Because they were those, I'm not judging, what Black people did back then, we cannot judge. You know, they did what they had to do to survive. So her two daughters, though, were dark skinned because their father was from Ghana, actually. So I like that African aspect in the story. And like I said, I already talked about it, but I think it's a great story if you want to learn a little bit about Canada and specifically Montreal. It's very interesting. Don't go into these books, which I mentioned again in that video that I hope is going to be posted very soon. Don't go into these books thinking that you're there for an adventure of some sort. These books are not your typical fictional stories. They're very much close to reality. You know what I mean? For me, these books are educational. So, you know, on my channel, just like I love sharing with you guys books that are, to escape, I also like to learn, right? So you learn a lot about Montreal, the Black people, the white people. Maybe I can share 2-3 quotes that I didn't share in the videos. Oh, listen to this little passage. You're from the States where there are lots of Negroes, but when you're a minority here in Canada, it's easy to develop a sense of inferiority. I don't want my girls to become victims of other people's stupidity or outright bigotry. How can I help them to grow up with self-confidence and pride when to be colored is to be at the bottom of the ladder? Oof. Oof. Now, if that paragraph alone didn't make you curious enough to discover what she's talking about, I don't know, but it's a reality. It's what makes white folks so schizophrenic. They're told they're superior and they're afraid to discover they're not. Woo! Okay, let that sink in. Okay, last passage that I can share with you. Y'all can see that I've tabbed this book. It's full of information. Like, I feel like Canadians, if you're watching me, you need to read this. Okay, Montrealers as well, y'all need to read about the history of your city. I like this part. She talked about the struggles of Black men. I think part of his enormous frustration stems from knowing that as a young man who doesn't come from a well-to-do family, he's denied any opportunity to study formally or to pursue a respectable trade or career without being beholden in perpetuity. I used to think we women had it hard, but now I think black men suffer a double whammy. And that's true. And I think I mentioned that in the video, in the sense that there was a scene where a young man not abuses, I don't want to say, but like he physically did something to the girl that he loved. And I think I talked about it when I read the book of the three women that talked about the mothers of W.E. Du Bois. I think it was Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. Sorry, not W. Du Bois. James Baldwin, okay? James Baldwin had an abusive dad, okay? And he explains it exactly like the author talks about black people back then. They wanted to do, the best for their families, but unfortunately, they were always met with obstacles, with challenges. They took that frustration out on their partner. And this story actually is reminiscent of another story that I just read in Thomas Sankara, which was also the abuse that women went through at the hands of their husbands, because again, they were living in a society that was colonized by white people, and the black African wanted to be a man, wanted to provide for his family, but again, he was only left to do stupid jobs. And he comes home, he's frustrated, he takes out, So this, I'm not here to excuse anything. I'm just telling you where these women were coming from, talking about the frustrations of black men then. Really recommend this book. Next, I want to talk to you about, real quick, oh my gosh, I want to talk to you about The Gilded Years. I read this book, again, it's another book by about passing. It's the story of Anita Hemming, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Anita Hemmings. She was really white. Y'all, you gotta check her picture. Look at this girl. Look at this girl, y'all. She's so white. But y'all know the whole black drop, that makes you, So anyways, her story is that she went to the school, Vassar College, okay, in the 1897. And Vassar School was an all-women school, college, and it was only for white people. But then since she could pass, she was encouraged by her family to go and attend. She filled out the form. I think she checked white, right? So she went there, and then everything's going well. On her last year, because it was a 3-year program that she was taking, she wanted to be a teacher. On her last year, that's when all hell breaks loose, Her roommate discovers that she's not white. So she goes on a mission to make sure that Anita doesn't graduate. She wants everybody to know, although she wanted everybody to know that Anita was black, she was more furious to let the world know that she bunked with a Negro woman. You guys should read this book. She was furious, y'all. For her, it was inconceivable to have bunked with a white passing Negro. So, when I read this book, I have to tell you guys, okay? When I read this book, I had mixed feelings because I was learning about Anita Hemming's story. And this story is set in which part of the United States? Okay, New York? Part of New York, okay? You guys know that during that time, the author talks to you about how college women reacted, So it's a college with white women. So you see how white women interacted, how they're happy, how they interact. They talked about their families, how they were well established and all that stuff. And then the minute they talked about the Negro, the black people, their language changed, their demeanor changed. So it was hard for me to enjoy this story while these women were just kind of chattering, enjoying life. You see how they're like going to college, doing all these girly stuff that we all do together now, black and white, but they were doing among themselves. And it was hard for me to like, oh yeah, it's just the young girls doing the young. No, it was like, wow, you guys are able to enjoy life and be decent people while you're hating on another race, other black women. Jesus, man. But apart from that, it's a story that is worth knowing. Like I said, I already talked about it. And Anita, in real life, that she continued to pass to the point of her descendants never knowing that they have black ancestry or that she reclaimed that blackness. That's for you to find out. I can't remember what I rated, but it's at least 3 something. It's at least 3 something. Okay, once my hubby finishes editing the other video, he'll tell you what I rated this one, but I know it's above 3, so I recommend for sure. And then I read City of Saints and Thieves. Again, it's a white author. And y'all recall that I said that there are many black stories that I'm drawn to. And I don't want to say unfortunately, but they are a lot of times written by white people. Like this story is about a Congolese girl who is actually, the story is set during another of the same war that's still going on today in Congo. You know, the M23 were attacking Congolese people in the eastern part of Congo. So she's a refugee who ran to Kenya and with her mom. So it's actually very fast paced. It's not brutal. You're not gonna hear about, you know, the many women were raped by hour, by minute. No. This is like a story of a woman, a girl. She's young, she's 16 years old, and her mom has been murdered. So she's on a journey to seek vengeance and also discover who murdered her mom, right? It was very pertinent, especially during this time that we're going through, especially that people are raising their voices or talking more about what's going on in Congo. She was doing that a while ago. When was this book written? 2015. We're 2025, 10 years ago, y'all. And we're still talking about the same story. So apart from you learning a little bit of the Swahili, because I love the fact that she talked about Swahili, she even has a glossary at the end of the book where she explains certain wording. I love that aspect. I love that she talked a lot of the familiarity of the food, the people, the language, and I was like, oh, I recognize that. That's definitely Congo. So I definitely recommend. This is a 4 out of 5. Okay, I recommend. Whew. And then finally, I told you guys in that video, okay, I keep saying that, but I talked about this as well, and this, it was not what I thought it was. Let's just say that, okay? But it's this story about this Japanese housewife. So her name is Mizuki, and Mizuki is depressed because one, her husband is not giving her the attention that she deserves, you know, and two, she tries to kill herself. It's at the back of the book, and she doesn't do it. She begins an affair. It's also here. Then one day she meets Kiyoshi, a successful restaurateur. In him, Mizuki rediscovers freedom, friendship, and the neon electric pulse of the city she has loved, okay? So I guess why I'm saying it wasn't that spectacular for me is simply because I think I expected the element of an affair to develop into this wild adventure. There was none of that. It was really tamed, you know? It was really tamed. I wish once she met Kiyoshi, there was a Mizuki Kiyoshi kind of, you know, thing, and it was barely there. And I find that she had tendency of putting a bit of humor in her story, and sometimes I got the humor, sometimes I felt short. I didn't get the humor, but it's probably me, but there's a little bit of humor in it, right? Because it does say at the end that funny, provocative. It did have elements of the way she would describe a certain, you know, reaction or her reaction to certain things. And yeah, so it was like 2.75 out of 5. I'm sorry that I'm not giving you a lot, but it was okay. Finally, those are the physical books. I finished reading The Women's March. First of all, let me just say thank you to all the white women who marched on behalf of other white women. Let's just say it. It wasn't all women. You guys did not march for all women. Maybe a little bit of you, but most of you were marching for white women to get your votes, right? Because you guys were tired of living in this patriarchal society and you saw what the men were doing, and you know, you guys wanted to get your votes in. So I took notes, and I want to just read my notes, so you know, because it was quite a very elaborate book. It was detailed. So we follow, I think, 4 women. Right. I want to make sure it's 4 women. By the way, it's by Jennifer Chiaverini. So Alice, and then we have Maud, and then we have Ida. Okay, so it's 3 women actually. So Alice, we begin the story with Alice. Alice is in Pennsylvania. She's of a Quaker family. So you already know she's obviously against, racism, black. Alice is of Quaker faith. She is basically going in places where the men are, having conversations, having meeting about, I think it was during Roosevelt time when he was in government. So she goes into those meetings and then she tries to get her voice known and tries to ask questions, and then she goes to prison, but then she doesn't stop. She continues on marching. Okay, that's Alice's story. And then you have Ida. Ida is this black woman, and she is also fighting for the women's vote, for the black woman. And Ida's part is very hard because it talked about the lynching. Lynching was happening a lot. I think there was 1,000 men. Yeah, 1,000 men were lynched between 1882 and 1892. And she had a newspaper where she would write about what was going on in, where was she? Illinois. She was in Chicago, Illinois. That's where Ida was from. And her newspaper was destroyed. Every time black people did try to do things for themselves, for their own self, right? There were always these white people who decided that, not only do I not like you, I don't want to see you thrive, I'm gonna destroy whatever you try to do. So we have the movement, the suffragette movement, that blooms. There was another movement in 1866, but that lay dormant. So with the movement that Alice and Ida and Maud were starting, the suffragist movement, became even more spread throughout the United States. We also read about the American Equal Rights Association. She mentioned a lot of these associations, the NWACC, Women Movements. I probably didn't get those letters, but I'll put it here. They spoke about the South versus the North, because women in the South or North white women in the North were more tolerant than the white women in the South. Yeah, Northerners were a little progressive, but they still struggled with rights for everyone. And she puts it clearly. I think it was this white woman who was talking to other white women in white women's meeting. I think Ida, she was like the only colored woman. She was there because that's what they used back then, colored. She was there and she explains it. She's like, Northerners, we're okay, we're nice, but we are nice when black women do not try to go above their class. That's basically what she was trying to say. So the House of Commons, Alice was arrested multiple times, brought in prison. That still did not deter her from, marching on to get the women's vote. So Maud is the third woman. She's a librarian in New York. She founded the New York Anti-Poverty Society. She's from an Irish family who immigrated in the United States. She protested in Albany. She was in one of those meetings when Roosevelt was president, and she asked if women can vote. You should hear the answer that Roosevelt gave. It was quite an answer. I like the fact that the author mentioned Ida was friend with W.E. Du Bois. They had conversation. They mentioned Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. She went as far as, talking about Wilson, the next president. She talked about, he was the 28th president. And then finally you arrive at the part where Ida, Maud, Alice basically march on, because they were from different parts of the United States, so they all march on with other suffragettes, women. I think she explained from I think it was Pennsylvania to this city, all the way to, was it Washington? March to Washington to finally meet Wilson, the President Wilson, and present to them their case, which was give us the vote. Did they succeed? It came later on. Throughout the book, you will see that the women, whenever they would go on their march, they were being harassed by the men who were like, go back to your house and cook and go raise some children and blah, blah, blah. Oh, something. Y'all can just imagine the time and, the men back then. And what was also very present among these groups and movements and association was that there were different groups of women. Can you imagine, like, you know, it's different states in the United States, right? And you have different movements, and sometimes they clashed, you know. They were there for, I guess, a common goal, but you have to understand that they did not all get along. So I just want to read you guys a few quotes. Y'all know I like to do that, right? So let's see. Miss Anthony took the stage, and as if to verify Ida's remarks, she described how surprised and shocked she had been during her recent travels in the South to observe how fiercely the color line was enforced. Train stations kept separate waiting rooms for whites and blacks. Some rail cars bore placards announcing that they were reserved for white passengers only. To her great indignation at a suffrage convention in Southern City, she did not name black women had been obliged to crowd into the upper galleries rather than sit among their white sisters in the more spacious and comfortable main house. And there's another incident that happened with Ida. She's in a train, she paid first class. The white porter comes and tells her that she has to sit like where the suit, you know, from the smoke and all that had to be. You know what she decided? She decided to leave the train, and she actually sued the company. And she got some reparation, only for that reparation to be repaid back to these white people because they went and counter complained, or if you brought it. Anyways, I wanted to read to you guys this one. Listen to this, okay? And tell me if it's not reminiscent of the current climate and what's going on in the United States with the votes. Because this is about a vote. And it's weird because as I was reading about women's votes and how white women were getting together, excluding black women, it just reminded me of what happened in the United States while they voted Trump. Listen, white women she had considered intelligent, just, and compassionate could suddenly pivot and put loyalty to their race above that to their sex. They would inexplicably take the part of white people who were clearly in the wrong rather than with people of color, even if it meant compromising their moral principles to do so. Hello? Is not that what happened with the Trump election? He clearly said that you guys were not gonna have the right to abort, but yet a majority voted him in. I'm not done, y'all. Ida had observed that while women of all races sought the vote in order to gain more autonomy, it seemed that white women desired most was to be equal to men, whereas women of color saw the ballot as a means to bring about racial equality and to uplift their communities. Far too many white women wanted to elevate themselves while keeping people of color subservient. When was this book written? When was this time? And here we are. Here we are today. Let me not say more. Last quote. When I was reading, I was like, I gotta share with you guys. I gotta share this with y'all. I like what Ida said here. When it was time for her to march, there were some discussions about her marching together with the white people or staying at the back and holding her banner. She said she will not march at all. She will march on her own, but she will not be back of a certain delegation of white suffragists because they couldn't be with a white collar. They couldn't be seen, or their case will not be properly accepted. So she says this. She would march with the Illinois delegation, but she would march for all black folks wondering when the American promise of liberty and justice would include people who looked like them. She would march for her own daughters who had witnessed their mother toiling on behalf of their race all their lives, persisting even when progress came only in frustratingly small increments. She would march for her mother and grandmothers who had taught her courage, strength, and forbearance, who had lifted her up on their shoulders so she could reach opportunities they had dreamed of. Ah! Isn't that nice? Thank you, Ida. Thank you, Miss Ida. So, on behalf of all of us immigrant people and who can finally come into the United States and almost feel like we're entitled, can we not forget the fight of these women, and especially for us, the black women who made this possible. So when you have certain people disrespecting, again, black women, this is why I say read, educate yourself, because you could never disrespect Black people, and because you do not know what they've done, what they have gone through, and what they continue to go through for us to be able to come in and start having a mouth. Okay, that's not what we're gonna do. So Black people, I got you. You know, we sisters, we brothers, I got you. Anyways, you guys, so on to the Audible that I read. I listened to a new release, which was part of my new release list. It was The Queen Spades by Sarah Raleigh. Now this is by a Nigerian British author, and it's a YA. And initially the premise of the book sounded fantastic. You know, it's about this young girl who was enslaved in Sierra Leone and brought to Britain, London, England, and she's brought as the queen. What of the queen? Brought to England as Queen Victoria's property. And it's essentially her journey in avenging, first of all, the little boy with whom they were on a boat, and because he was sickly, they just threw him over the boat. Just like that. You know, human cargo, just like that. So that's when her mind started working. Once she was under the queen's protection, she vowed that she was going to take revenge on everybody there, including the queen herself. And that's essentially the story. Like, I listened to it on Audible because I wanted to listen to it before I decided to buy. And it's actually going to be a 3 out of 5. I was a bit lost because the narrator, I found her voice was too strong. It probably doesn't make sense what I'm saying. But like, I felt that it took away from the story itself. And plus it was very English. That makes that like very like British. You know what I mean? And I was lost at times with the number of characters, because in her journey to kill all these people, she was entangled in a little royal scandal mess, you know. So I need to conclude. I will recommend. I'm not sure if maybe reading it would give you a better experience than listening, but maybe you could try and do both at the same time. But like I said, it's Sarah Forbes. I think it's Forbes, Sarah Bonetta Forbes. And the part that stayed with me was when her mother, her adoptive mother, because her family was killed, you guys know how it was, decided with the queen that she was gonna get married. And I think the Queen Victoria suspected that Sarah was, what's the word? She was scheming something. So she decides that she's gonna get her married, not only to this older Sierra Leone guy that came from Sierra Leone, and but then she's fuming, she's mad, she's like, how dare the queen. So yeah, and there's a lot of fighting that happens. There's a lot of her meeting this guy that's like in a clandestine place in England, in the like dirty parts of England, and making a deal with them so he can help her bring down the rest of the royal subjects. And then close to the end, there's a whole thing that blows over, and yeah, so I recommend. Okay, 3 out of 5. And then I listened to, this is my book, that's the list of books I've read so far, so I had to remember. Queen Spade, I talked about that. The Wife Between Us was a thriller book that one of the book club ladies chose. That's why we read for the month of April, and it was okay. It's 2.75 out of 5. The lady seemed to have liked it. So it's a story about, I remember the name of the man, it was Richard, and then there's the wife, and then the ex-wife. So there's the fiance and the ex-wife. And at the beginning, you follow the wife. You almost believe that the wife is cuckoo. That's how the story wants you to believe, until she starts to unveil what was happening in her marriage and why her marriage dissolved. And at the same time, you also meet the new younger wife, well, soon to be wife of Richard, and it's essentially the wife's journey into wanting to warn the ex-wife of who Richard is. And there's a twist. The soon to be wife is not who she is either, and it's like you know, anyways, it was a good story. I can't say much about it because it's a thriller. We don't want to spoil for you guys. Like I said, it's 275 to a 3. You know, I'd recommend. Most of the ladies loved it. It's just me. Maybe it's just because I don't have a bone for thrillers and it's either a miss or hit for me, but I'm sure it's good. And it's a story written by 2 authors. So yeah. And then I actually read Nothing Breaks Like a Heart by Barbara Freedy. It was such a weird story, but again, it's also a thriller. These stories, the reason why I read them, it's because they're free on Audible, and while I'm waiting for my credit to kick in like on the 25th, and I need something to listen because, you know, I'm not able to physically read a book, I choose those free Audible. So it was one of those, and it's this girl, what's her name? I'm hoping there's a name for her. We don't hear the name of the main character, but the man, the second character, is Andrew. So the main character is involved with Andrew because at the beginning there's a fire where she works and Andrew comes to her rescue. Long story short, they're on this beautiful island and they are you know, getting ready to tie the knot, and that's when things start to happen. And as things are happening, she's trying to look at her husband or her future husband like, are you not involved or what's going on? Because ever since I got to know you, things are like, you know, not going according to plan. And not only that, there's also Andrew's ex at the party, and then a murder happens on the island. That's all I'm gonna say. So it was a story if you're bored and you need a quick thriller that does not make you think too much. It's it. Okay, so it's a 275 to 3 out of 5 for me for Nothing Breaks Like a Heart. And I have to say, the narrator sounded so weird. This is how she talked. Andrew, he was like my everything. I can't even do it because the voice sounded so weird to me. But yeah. So I think that's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What? I read 9 books, and 3 of them were not part of the TBR. But hey, I read 9 books. Okay, so there you have it, you guys. That was my wrap up of all the books I read in the month of April. And as I am talking to you guys, I am already reading the books that, you know, I chose for May. And you guys, it's a lot. Anyways, if you like the video, please don't forget to like it, comment, share, and your notification bell, you know, so that you are notified whenever I drop one of those videos. Yeah, and you know, give a like to also my shorts. I'm really trying to get more engaging with my shorts. You know, I'm letting you know my state of mind while I'm reading these books through those little shorts. So I hope you like them, you check them out sometimes. And if you don't want to do the comment, you know, because it's too much like writing all the comments, you could just leave me purple hearts for my purple theme TBR, and for the Women's March, and for the Gilded Years, but mostly for City of Saint and Thieves, for all the Congolese women out there. And please don't forget to check the following websites. Okay, all right, ciao.